Hi everyone. I have something to read to you. Communitarianism. What is it? I've been trying to understand better so that I can explain better what communitarianism is. I have to be honest, from the first time that I heard Cindy Niles utter the word communitarianism to this very morning, I still would have felt very uncomfortable if I'd been put on the spot and been asked to explain exactly what it meant. In fact, it took me a good few months before I could even pronounce it properly. If I had been asked before this morning to explain what it meant, I would have said something true but lacking in substance, something like communitarianism is the worst aspects of communism and capitalism combined. So, in questionable pursuit of substance, I have been reading the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which initially posits, now this is a long quote, but I'll let you know with my fingers. Communitarianism is the idea that human identities are largely shaped by different kinds of constitutive communities or social relations, and that this conception of human nature should inform our moral and political judgments, as well as policies and institutions. We live most of our lives in communities, similar to lions, who live in social groups rather than individualistic tigers who live alone most of the time. Those communities shape and ought to shape our moral and political judgments, and we have a strong obligation to support and nourish the particular communities that provide meaning for our lives, without which we'd be deeply disoriented, deeply lonely, and incapable of informed moral and political judgment. That's the end. I particularly like the reference to lions because I like lions and because I know that their moral and political judgments are famously derived from the best interests of the pride. Although the young males may be disoriented, deeply lonely, and incapable of making informed moral and political judgments when they're forced out of the community between the ages of 2 and 4 to go and live a nomadic existence, much like a tiger. Happily, if they kill a mane, that's Mane, the name given to a dominant male, the Mufasa of a pride, and they kill all of the mane's cubs, they can settle comfortably back into the community of devastated and subjugated females who do all the child rearing and the hunting and get back to making informed moral and political judgments based on the well being of the collective. Anyway, I was so entertained by the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's definition of communitarianism that I kept on reading and discovered that contemporary communitarians argue against a liberal view of the self as an individual who, while they cannot completely extricate themselves from the social construct, still impinges autonomous will on the world. So that's the liberal view. The contemporary communitarians feel that this view, and that's a long quote as well, they feel that this view neglects the extent to which individuals are embodied agents in the world. Far from acting in ways designed to realize an autonomously arrived at life plan, vast areas of our lives are in fact governed by unchosen routines and habits that lie in the background. More often than not, we act in ways specified by our social background when we walk, dress, play games, speak, and so on, without having formulated any goals or made any choices. It is only when things break down from the normal, everyday, unchosen mode of existence that we think of ourselves as subjects dealing with an external world, having the experience of formulating various ways of executing our goals, choosing from among those ways, and accepting responsibility for the outcomes of our actions. In other words, traditional intentionality is introduced at the point that our ordinary way of coping with things is insufficient. So, what this means is that contemporary communitarians view the self as something which only comes into existence when the collective breaks down. The implication being that we are at the moment all struggling, not because tyrannical forces have hijacked and corrupted our liberal democracies. We're struggling because liberal democracies are an unnatural state of being which wouldn't require to exist if we were all living in connected collectives, like bees. If we were operating with a hive mind, we wouldn't even realize that we exist as individuals. Never mind that there is one queen bee for whom all the worker bees sacrifice their lives, because it isn't sacrifice if it was what nature intended, or indeed if you don't really exist except in relation to the greater good. So it seems to me that a more informed definition of communitarianism, as it would apply to the people of today, would be decentralized communism under the auspices of a global technocratic queen bee. Um, what could be better and easier to regulate than a world full of non nation states populated by decentralized communities who intentionally self limit through circular economies and transact within those communities by means of a digital medium controlled by a global entity based on a zero trust model that enables ultimate gatekeeping? In short, we can either arrest the billionaires, politicians, and philanthropists who have shown such blatant disregard for our laws, values, and societies, or we can let them off scot free for their crimes against humanity and sanctify them as the benefactors of a new version of reality in which we would all be much happier if we all just ceased to exist. The choice is yours, but not for long. Hi again. Just beware of communitarians in sheep's clothing, my friends. Okay? All right. Thank you so much for listening. I love you. Bye.